The palace walls shook with shock. Prince William caught Queen Camilla's son bullying Catherine, and what happened next changed everything. No warning, no mercy. In a moment of royal fury, William made a bold move that stunned insiders and ignited public outrage. The monarchy would never be the same again. The day it all fell apart. It was supposed to be just another quiet evening inside the palace. The air was calm, the usual buzz of royal staff filled the corridors, and behind the doors of the royal drawing room, small talk floated gently over clinking glasses. Everything looked perfect on the surface, but perfection shattered in a second. What started as a simple gathering quickly turned tense when Camilla's son, Tom Parker Bowles, reportedly crossed a line no one ever expected. According to multiple insiders, Tom was overheard mocking and insulting Catherine, Princess of Wales, loudly enough for nearby guests and staff to hear. And it wasn't just a single remark. One witness said he kept going. It was cruel, like he was trying to get under her skin. It wasn't playful, it was bullying. Catherine, ever composed, didn't react. She sat quietly, with the kind of grace that only made the insults more jarring. But the situation was about to turn explosive. Prince William walked in, and he saw everything. Reports say William froze for a moment, as if trying to process what he was witnessing. The room went silent. Staff stopped moving. Guests turned away, pretending not to notice. But everyone noticed. Then came the fury. Without raising his voice, William reportedly stepped forward and said, "That's enough. You leave. Now." The tone? Ice cold. No shouting. Just royal authority sharper than steel. Tom tried to argue, but it didn't matter. William had made up his mind. Sources close to the palace say Tom was immediately thrown out, escorted off the property like an outsider. There was no cover-up, no spin, just raw consequences. One staffer recalled, "It was like watching the entire dynamic shift in seconds." William made it clear, this wasn't going to be tolerated. What had once been a normal evening was now a palace scandal, one too big to hide behind protocol. And the fallout? It didn't stop there. Because while the walls were still echoing from that confrontation, Camilla's reaction turned it into a full-blown royal crisis, William's unforgiving stand. When Prince William acted that night, he didn't just defend his wife, he sent a message to the entire royal family. There would be no second chances. Not this time. Camilla's son, a regular guest behind palace walls, was suddenly cast out, not with ceremony, but with silence. He wasn't just asked to leave, he was banned. And it wasn't the palace guards or a private secretary who made the call. It was William himself. One palace aide described it like this: William's eyes didn't even blink. He stood there like stone. I've never seen him like that. It wasn't rage, it was resolve. In that moment, William wasn't just a prince. He was a husband, protector, and future king. And he wasn't going to allow anyone, royal or not, to humiliate Catherine under his watch. Insiders say he refused to discuss the matter further with Camilla or her team. There was no debate, no reconsideration, no royal smoothing over, just one clear verdict: exile. The consequences were immediate. Camilla, blindsided and embarrassed, reportedly begged for a private conversation. But William wouldn't budge. She tried to reason with him, one insider claimed, but he just kept saying the same thing: "This is done." Behind palace doors, the tension hit a boiling point. William's decision broke the usual balance of royal politeness. It was bold. Some even called it ruthless. But to many, it was long overdue. Online, the reaction was fast and fierce. Supporters flooded forums and social media. Finally, someone standing up for Kate. William is protecting his family like a true king. And as William's reputation soared, another figure began to crumble. Because Camilla's silence and her son's disgrace were about to send the palace into total chaos. Camilla's desperate defense. The confrontation may have ended that night, but the real storm began the next morning. Camilla was stunned. Her son, thrown out of the palace like a disgraced intruder. There was no warning, no soft landing, just pure royal rejection. Inside the palace, she moved quickly behind closed doors, desperate to regain control. Sources say she requested a private meeting with William. Some even claim she showed up at his residence unannounced. But it didn't matter. William reportedly refused to see her. He wasn't just standing his ground, he was building a wall. And for Camilla, that wall felt like the beginning of the end. One insider whispered she looked shaken, not angry, just rattled. She realized she couldn't pull rank here. Not with William, not with Catherine. For years, Camilla had carefully worked her way into the royal machine, gaining public approval, building alliances, rising from scandal to queen. But that night, everything shifted. One outburst from her son, and the cracks reappeared. She didn't try to deny what happened. Instead, she reportedly pleaded for understanding. She said Tom had been under pressure, that he didn't mean it, that he'd just been careless with his words. But William wasn't buying it. His response? Ice-cold silence. He had made his choice, and it wasn't going to change. The tension between William and Camilla, always quiet and polite, now boiled into something unspoken but dangerous. Their relationship had been uneasy from the beginning, but this moment lit a fire that couldn't be ignored. Behind the scenes, Camilla's influence began to dim. Staff who once followed her lead started pulling back. Conversations ended when she entered the room. Whispers started growing. Some questioned whether she had protected her son in the past. Others said this wasn't the first time Catherine had been on the receiving end. The phrase "Camilla's son strikes again" began circulating among royal watchers online. But Camilla didn't fight back publicly. She didn't release a statement. She didn't deny the reports. To some, that silence felt like dignity. But to many others, it felt like guilt. A former aide commented, "She knew the damage was done, and this time, no amount of charm could fix it." What made things worse? King Charles stayed quiet too, as if he didn't know what side to take, as if he couldn't. So Camilla was left standing alone, her son disgraced, her reputation bleeding, her relationship with William hanging by a thread. And while she scrambled to regain control, Catherine stayed calm, quiet, unshaken. But inside her world, the damage had already been done. Catherine, Grace, under attack. While the palace spiraled into damage control, Catherine did what she always does. She stayed silent. Not because she was weak, but because she didn't need to speak. Her silence was her power. Insiders close to the family revealed that Catherine was deeply hurt by the incident. Not just by the words thrown at her, but by who they came from, and the fact that it happened inside her home. For someone already enduring a personal health battle, this wasn't just cruel, it was deeply unfair. One close friend reportedly said, "She looked pale that night. Not angry, just tired, like someone who had been fighting 100 quiet battles already." But she never lashed out. She didn't give interviews. She didn't leak stories. She didn't try to defend herself in the press. Instead, she showed up the next morning with her usual calm smile, holding her head high, walking beside William like nothing had happened. Except everything had changed. Public support for her surged like never before. People could feel it. She was under attack, and she didn't flinch. Online hashtags exploded. #StandWithKate, #ProtectThePrincess, #Not on her watch. Even critics who had stayed silent in the past came out in support. What made Catherine different was simple: grace under pressure. Every royal watcher knows Catherine doesn't play games, she doesn't feed drama. But when pushed, she shows the kind of quiet strength that can silence a room. And that's exactly what happened. Even royal staff reportedly began shifting loyalty. One palace source said, "It's like everyone knew who the real queen was that week. Not by title, but by presence." William stood fiercely by her side, but Catherine didn't hide behind him. She stood tall, without revenge, without bitterness. She let the truth speak for itself. She didn't need to attack Camilla. She didn't need to react to the whispers. Because the public had already chosen a side. And this time, they chose her. Behind her stillness was a message louder than any headline. She wasn't just a royal wife, she was a queen in waiting. And while Camilla's world was unraveling, Catherine's crown was only growing stronger. Charles caught in the crossfire. As the royal crisis deepened, one figure found himself trapped in the middle of it all: King Charles. He hadn't seen the confrontation firsthand, but by morning, the details had reached him. Fast, blunt, unfiltered. His wife's son had been thrown out of the palace by his own son, and it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was war. Behind palace walls, Charles reportedly tried to calm things down. He reached out to William first, hoping to find some middle ground, but the future king wasn't interested. William made it clear, this was not negotiable. One palace source said, the king kept saying, "Let's talk this through," but William wouldn't budge. He told his father, "He disrespected my wife. That's the end of it." Then came the harder conversation with Camilla, and it wasn't pretty. Insiders revealed that Camilla was furious behind the scenes. She felt blindsided, humiliated. She wanted Charles to step in, to intervene, to make it right. But he didn't. He couldn't. Because deep down, he knew William was right. Sources say Charles privately admitted he was deeply disappointed in Tom's behavior. But publicly, he said nothing. No statement, no comment. Just cold silence. That silence didn't go unnoticed. One senior courtier shared, "The king looked like a man torn in half. On one side, his wife. On the other, his son and future queen. And he stayed right in the middle, doing nothing." That middle ground came at a cost. William's respect for his father began to crack. The two men who had once stood united in the wake of Elizabeth's death now found themselves on opposite ends of a moral line. It wasn't about protocol anymore. It was about character. Even the staff could feel the shift. Meetings grew colder. Eye contact vanished. Schedules were rearranged to avoid overlap. The air in the palace turned thick with tension. For Charles, it was a lose-lose situation. Defend his wife, and he risks war with his heir. Defend his son, and his marriage fractures again. So he did what monarchs often do when things get messy. He disappeared. Public appearances were suddenly postponed. A scheduled garden party was quietly cancelled. The king went silent, hoping the storm would pass without him having to choose a side. But silence isn't safety. The media picked up on the quiet quickly. Headlines asked the question, "Where is the king?" Royal watchers didn't see a leader. They saw a man ducking responsibility. And while Charles faded into the background, a darker war began to take shape behind palace doors. Because what had started as one confrontation was now spreading like wildfire, and no one was ready for how ugly it would get next. The palace turns toxic. After the scandal, the palace didn't just feel tense. It felt poisoned. Behind the polished wood doors and ancient stone walls, something changed. People whispered more. Smiles became shorter. And the energy? Completely off. Staff began choosing sides. Some stayed loyal to Camilla, insisting her son had simply made a mistake. Others stood firmly with William and Catherine, saying enough was enough. The result? Divisions everywhere. A former courtier described it as walking through a minefield. You didn't know who to speak to, what to say, or who was listening. Suddenly, every conversation felt like a test. Every glance had weight. Every silence had meaning. And then came the rumors. Old stories about Tom Parker Bowles started resurfacing. Claims that he'd made inappropriate remarks at private dinners. That he'd been rude to staff. That Camilla had protected him in the past. Nothing proven, but the timing was too perfect to ignore. This wasn't his first outburst, one palace aide said quietly. People just didn't speak about it before. Now, everyone's talking. Even senior officials began losing trust. Rooms that once held united leadership now felt like battlegrounds. Meetings were tense. Camilla's allies were suddenly being left out of planning decisions. And those seen supporting Catherine? Promoted, elevated, empowered. There was no official memo, but everyone felt it. The balance of power was shifting. Camilla's influence, once subtle but strong, was now shrinking. People were distancing themselves from her, avoiding eye contact, whispering the word liability. Meanwhile, Catherine's quiet grace had become a rallying point. Her calm, her dignity, her silence in the face of public humiliation, it all won her respect in ways no speech ever could. The contrast was undeniable. One woman stood silent, but strong. The other, surrounded by scandal. And the staff weren't the only ones taking sides. The media began circling, fast, because what was happening inside the palace walls was about to explode on the outside. The media eruption. It didn't take long. The palace walls could only hold so much. Then, boom, the story exploded. By sunrise, tabloids were already running with it. But by noon, it wasn't just the British press. It was everywhere. The scandal had gone global. Headlines hit with brutal force. Camilla's son disgraced at palace event. Prince William defends Kay Pufoskoit after vicious insult. Royal rift. Future king draws line in the sand. The media smelled blood, and they were relentless. Even the most conservative outlets, the ones usually careful with royal gossip, couldn't ignore it. Too many sources, too much drama, too much fire. The story wasn't just about a family fight. It was about loyalty, power, and protection. Reporters flooded social channels, tracing every moment from the event. Eyewitnesses came forward. Lip readers dissected footage. commentators speculated on every glance, every whisper, every cold smile in the days after. And what emerged from the chaos was clear. William was a hero. Catherine was a queen. And Camilla? A problem. Royal insiders tried damage control. Silently, subtly. They hoped the story would die in a day or two, but it didn't, because something deeper had been touched. The public had taken it personally. People weren't just reading the headlines. They were reacting with emotion, passion, loyalty. For many, this wasn't just about palace drama. It was about right and wrong. William's decision to throw out Camilla's son wasn't seen as rash. It was seen as righteous. A husband defending his wife. A future king showing strength. One viral tweet read, "William is more like Diana every day. He protects, he acts, he doesn't play palace games." And then there was Catherine. The media couldn't stop praising her. One outlet called her the quiet thunder of the monarchy. Another said, if Grace had a face, it would be Kate Middleton's. Photo after photo of her surfaced, smiling politely at public events, walking tall beside William, never acknowledging the firestorm. And that silence? It only made her more powerful. One commentator said it best. While others are playing chess in the dark, Catherine is simply showing up and winning hearts. Meanwhile, Camilla's side fumbled in the shadows. No statement, no apology, not even a hint of remorse. Her silence, once used to maintain mystery, now looked like cowardice. And then came the brutal shift. The public turned. Old wounds reopened. People remembered the past, the affair, Diana, the controversy. The internet flooded with comparisons. Side-by-sides of Diana shielding her sons and Catherine standing tall, paired with images of Camilla turning away from controversy. The hashtags surged. #Stand with Kate. Protect the princess. #Not our queen. And for the first time in a long while, the royal narrative wasn't controlled by press briefings or palace insiders. It was controlled by the people. Camilla's allies stayed quiet. Her defenders vanished from public debates. Even royal-friendly voices on morning talk shows hesitated. One commentator admitted live on air, "It's hard to defend someone who won't even speak up for herself or say sorry." The scandal wasn't just being covered anymore. It was being owned by the public. And their message was clear. We stand with Catherine. Not just because she's the future queen, but because she represents the kind of woman the public respects. Strong, calm, gracious, even when being attacked from within. And as the media storm reached its peak, something remarkable happened. The people stepped in, and they weren't backing down. The people stand with Catherine. The royal family has always existed behind gates, guarded by titles, protected by centuries of protocol. But this time, that wall broke. And standing in the spotlight was Catherine, silent, but stronger than ever. It started small. Just a few words online. Leave Kate alone. She deserves better. She's carried this family on her back. But by the end of the week, those words became a movement. Everywhere you looked, it was Kate. Instagram reels showing her graceful curtsies, clips of her comforting children during public appearances, old interviews where her poise and warmth stood out even then. Stand with. Kate was no longer a hashtag, it was a rallying cry. Public figures began speaking out. Journalists, celebrities, even former palace aides. One royal biographer wrote, "Catherine is the beating heart of the monarchy's future. Anyone who tries to shake her deserves the consequences." Even critics who once called her too quiet, too perfect, now admitted they had underestimated her. Because in the middle of chaos, Catherine didn't flinch, and the world noticed. Petitions were launched demanding Tom Parker Bowles be permanently banned from royal events. Thousands signed. Comment sections filled with love for Catherine and contempt for Camilla's silence. One user wrote, "You can't buy class. Catherine has it. Camilla doesn't." Outside palace gates, people gathered. Flowers were left. Notes were posted. Some read, "We see you, Catherine. Stay strong, our queen in waiting." The love wasn't performative. It was personal. To many, Catherine represented the woman they see in their sister, their mother, their friend. Kind, loyal, strong in silence, and deeply human. And unlike others in the firm, she never needed a PR machine to shine. Her strength spoke for itself. Meanwhile, inside the palace, the weight of public support began tipping the scales. Camilla's influence, which once operated in shadows, was now being overshadowed, and she knew it. One palace insider whispered, "Camilla thought her silence would protect her, but all it did was give the people more space to speak." And they didn't hold back. The palace had become divided, but the people were united, and they had made their choice. They chose the woman who stood with dignity, the woman who didn't fight back with words, but with grace, the woman who kept her crown, not on her head, but in how she carried herself. Catherine didn't have to speak, because this time, the nation spoke for her. And the message was loud, clear, and impossible to ignore. Camilla's silence, calculated or cowardly. As the palace continued to burn under public pressure, there was one voice noticeably missing. Queen Camilla's. Not a word, not a gesture, not even a line from a palace insider defending her son or acknowledging what happened. Just silence. At first, some believed it was a strategic move. Let the storm blow over. Don't add fuel to the fire. But days passed. Then a week. Still nothing. And that silence? It started to feel less like control and more like cowardice. Insiders revealed that behind closed doors, Camilla was livid. Not just at William, but at the press, at the palace aides who leaked the story, and even, according to one staff member, at Catherine herself. She felt ambushed, one aide said. She thinks the firm threw her son under the bus, and her with him. But the public didn't care about behind-the-scenes drama anymore. They wanted answers. They wanted accountability. And Camilla's refusal to speak made things worse. Her silence was seen as arrogance, not grace. A royal expert said on air, "She's not protecting her son. She's protecting her image. And frankly, she's failing at both." In social media spaces, the pressure intensified. "Where is Camilla?" began trending. Comments flooded the official Clarence House pages. Why is the Queen silent when a woman was bullied in her own home? Camilla's silence speaks volumes, and none of it is good. Even loyal supporters began backing away. There were no statements from her usual defenders, no sympathetic interviews, not a single attempt to explain or even show remorse. Her son had been exiled. Her influence was slipping, and her reputation was spiraling. And the more she remained silent, the more people started asking, Was this who she always was? People remembered the past, the history, the scandal, the role she played in Princess Diana's pain. Old clips were reposted, photos resurfaced. Headlines from decades ago were dragged back into the spotlight. The question echoed louder every day. Can Queen Camilla truly be trusted with the crown? Even within the palace, whispers grew darker. Her staff were tense. Advisors avoided confrontation. But there was a shift. A slow, steady retreat from her corner. The air around her, once filled with quiet control, now felt isolated. One senior insider confessed, "It's like she's on an island now. No one's coming to rescue her." And Catherine? She never said a word. She didn't need to. Camilla's silence said enough, for both of them. But while Camilla tried to disappear into the background, the rest of the royal family was facing a bigger storm. Because what happened that night didn't just break relationships, it rewrote the future. And the monarchy will never be the same again. Fallout. The future is rewritten. When the dust finally started to settle, the picture left behind was crystal clear. The power dynamic inside the palace had changed forever. Camilla's son, once casually included in royal spaces, had been banned permanently from palace events. According to multiple senior sources, there would be no re-entry, no redemption arc, no royal shielding. He was done. And that decision didn't come from Charles. It came from William. The message was loud. If you attack Catherine, you don't just lose your invitation. You lose your place in the monarchy. The king reportedly agreed, reluctantly. Those close to him say Charles knew he had to protect the future of the crown, even if it meant drawing a hard line against his own wife's child. But in doing so, something shifted in the firm. Charles's grip loosened. William's influence soared. Palace aides, strategists, and longtime courtiers quietly began turning their attention toward the Prince and Princess of Wales. Their decisions started carrying more weight. Their presence started commanding more respect. And Catherine? She wasn't just seen as William's wife anymore. She became the symbol of everything the monarchy hopes to survive on: dignity, strength, and public trust. People weren't calling her Kate anymore. They were calling her Queen in waiting. Across the Commonwealth, the shift was felt. In Canada, Australia, New Zealand, news coverage framed the story the same way. Catherine stood tall. Camilla fell silent. William took charge. One commentator summed it up. This wasn't just a family dispute. It was a seismic moment in royal power. A real-time shift in who's leading this monarchy and who's losing grip. Even behind palace doors, the future was being rewritten. Staff members reportedly changed their reporting lines. Some previously under Camilla's influence were quietly reassigned. Budgets shifted. Agendas were redrawn. And Camilla? She remained present at official events, but visibly diminished. Her smile was tight. Her words were rehearsed. And every time she appeared next to Charles, the press zoomed in, looking for cracks. Because even if the crown still sits on her head, the people had taken it away in their hearts. And Catherine? She didn't ask for a fight. But she walked through it with the quiet courage of a queen. The public saw it. The palace felt it. And William knew it. The message left behind couldn't be clearer. The monarchy is moving forward. And it's moving with Catherine. Camilla may wear the crown today, but the future? It belongs to someone else. One confrontation exposed the cracks, and one silent woman emerged stronger than ever. As Camilla's son vanished from royal life, Catherine rose, backed by a nation that chose dignity over drama. The firm didn't just shift power, it chose a future. And that future now walks beside William, ready to wear the crown.